Welcome back to the food forest. About 3 years ago, I made a video called the top bushes for your food forest. For some reason, YouTube picked that one up and ran it, pushing it to people more than any other video. It's not a particularly good video. It's actually probably one of my worst videos. But in that video, I actually made suggestions about what I think are the best bushes. That was 3 years ago, and my opinions drastically changed. In today's video, I'm going to make a little bit of adjustments to that, but I'm not going to formally go through my top list because it's really hard to put them in an order when you love them all. But there's a couple that I didn't mention, and I'll bring them up. More specifically, I'll bring up why I'm bringing them up. So this video is going to be about the top things that you should consider when you're adding bushes into your food forest. What makes the best bushes the best bushes? Stick around. Okay, so we're just gonna get to maybe one of my favorite bushes that wasn't even on that list, and that is black-cap raspberries. They're actually really small. So them being really small, I wouldn't have considered that a very good fruit when I first started. But this season especially, I found that sometimes the smallest berries will actually be the most productive, and you'll actually fill a jar faster. So I would say don't necessarily worry about how small the fruit is, if you know that it produces very, very heavy sets of fruit that are easy to pick. Two key things. So also, how pest-free are the plants? You know, some areas, some plants will be really, really prone to pest pressure, and in other areas not. My currants, for example, I know there is never anything in them. Now you can improve the pest resilience of your system by planting lots of plants to bring in predators. And I'll show you Wallflower Hill in a little bit, but a plant's natural pest resistance is probably something that you want to take into account as well. We'll pop down and show the gooseberries, which are way down in the back here near the road. And the gooseberries for me are just a magnet for every pest in the area. That doesn't mean don't include them. It can actually be a good thing. You just include it as a sacrificial plant, as a magnet to attract all the other pests. But you might not want to just fill your system with it. When in doubt, if you plant with lots of diversity, you'll get a lot of natural symbiosis like that happening, where some plants are just going to get smashed by pests, but that's good because they're food for the predators that eat them. So you kind of need pests in your system if you ever want to get predators that are going to eat those pests. But don't just plant your fruit trees and bushes. You can see this here is a peach that is covered in a carpet of yarrow, and we're attracting tons and tons of pollinators and beneficial insects in this way. This black raspberry I actually just planted at the side back of my food forest because it's thorny. I didn't like that, and it had small fruit, and I thought we'll stick it in the corner and we'll say we have it, but you know, we're not going to actually ever go there. And I didn't. I let the grasses all come up over it, and this thing is so darn hardy that it grew up through all the grasses, no problem. You know, it is being smothered by 6-foot tall grasses that are going to seed. I just let this thing go for the last couple of years. Resilience and a plant wanting to grow specifically in your climate is super important. Definitely take that into consideration. Okay, once you know that a plant is easy to harvest and puts on a large fruit set and wants to grow in your area, then also think about medicinal. So, you know, what is the quality of the fruit? Is it just a empty sugar, like, I don't know, say watermelon, although the rinds are really good for watermelon. Most people don't eat that. Or is it, you know, actually medicinal berries? This one is black currant, and I'll admit, it's not the best tasting berry. It's a little bit sour. But these things are basically medicine, and it's an acquired taste. It's actually been on a couple of my recent videos because I've enjoyed them so much. But the most important thing is these are some of the healthiest berries that I have on my land. And I have to say, no word of a lie, if I eat a lot of these, the next day, I feel like Superman. Okay, for the next one, we're actually going to stay on the same plant, these currants here. And isn't it funny how some of my favorite bushes have a lot of this stuff in common? The next thing is how easy they are to propagate. Currants are dead easy. You can stool mound them. You can basically put soil up all around the branches. And that, if you've ever seen air layering, where people will wrap a bag around a branch, let it root into it, seal it off, and then they'll cut below the branch and they have a brand new bush. Currants do really well for that. Stool mounding is kind of the same idea, but because they're a bush and they have a lot of different branches at the bottom of the tree, you can just basically mound up soil all around the currant, cut them all off at the bottom, and yeah, you're cutting your bush out, but you're getting like 10 new plants to plant. This is something that I've been doing with my currants. This is the only black currant bush that I had, and this one over here is the only red currant bush that I had, but I've been stool mounding these and propagating them out and splitting them. And for example, we got another one right here. So these currants are amazingly easy to stool mound, and I can get a huge food forest up and running for almost no money at all. So ease of propagation is really, really good when you combine it with the fact that they want to grow in your environment, they produce good food, they're easy to harvest. These red currants, I didn't really like them as much before because they got small little berries, but they're actually super easy to harvest. I found this year that even though these berries are really small, that when I came out here, you know, per unit of my time picking these things, I got a massive harvest and I filled the bucket faster than any other berry on my property, including raspberries, blackberries, currants, anything. These are actually the fastest for me to pull kilograms of food off of a plant. All right, next up, there's no berries on this plant, so why am I showing it to you? Well, this is a haskap, and the reason why I want to show you this one is this one combines everything that I've said already about my favorite bushes and things that makes them good, but they produce really, really early in the season. So when do the berries become available? This is so important, because if I just had a whole bunch of currants, then I would be getting overwhelmed right now with fruit. Now I am getting overwhelmed with fruit because I planted so much food, but at the beginning of the season, I'm overwhelmed with haskaps. Now, if I just picked my favorite fruit, let's just say it was the currants, it's really hard for me to tell what it actually is. And I just planted those because it ticked all the boxes and it was the #1 ranked food. If I, quantified all the aspects, rated them out of 10 and averaged it out, currants might actually be my favorite fruit. It's hard to say. But if I just did that and planted a bunch of currants, I would be getting so much food right now that I couldn't keep up. I would miss it. There's no way you can harvest it. Like, look how much is on there. And I've been harvesting off of this plant alone every single day for the last, basically, 3 weeks or so, filling baskets of food. But then I'd have nothing for the rest of the season. So make sure in your system you actually have a spread of when the fruit produces so that you can get a year-long harvest. Haskaps are a great choice for a very, very early season food. And next we're going way down there to see what this is. This gorgeous guild here is peach comfrey sea buckthorn. So this gorgeous plant is only about 2.5 years old, and look at the size of it. Now this thing fruits extremely late. I don't know if I'll be able to get in and show you this, but can you see all the berries there? These are an extremely late season plant, and I can actually harvest these right into February in my climate in the snow because they'll still have their fruit on them. Now these things are very prolific runners, so they're very easy to propagate. They will actually run under the ground rhizomally and pop up. You can divide it out, cut it, and move it. This whole entire section I didn't plant. These are running into this soil. The reason why they're running into that soil is because the soil is really poor here. Let's go around the back and I'll talk a little bit more about this. Okay, this here is Wildflower Garden, Wildflower Hill. And I created this when I created my pond. And I wanted somewhere for nature. So the pond is really the beating heart of my food forest and super important for the insect life that I enjoy here that keeps my food pest free. But when this pond was excavated, the backfill was essentially dead soil. So I wanted to rebuild it with native wildflower plants and early pioneers that are nitrogen fixers, which is why I put the sea buckthorn here. And you can see that choice was really good because the sea buckthorn have really dominated this space, but in a really good way. Now, a lot of people are afraid of sea buckthorn because they do this, but they really only do this in completely dead, destroyed, depleted soils because they're a nitrogen fixer and they can outcompete other plants by getting nitrogen from the atmosphere. However, I do have sea buckthorn in other areas of my food forest, and they don't do that well in other areas because they actually, as we're looking at the beneficial insects that are here on these wildflowers, because once these things start getting shaded out and once the quality of the soil improves where other plants can grow to compete with them, the sea buckthorn kind of just chill out and relax a little bit. At that point, you can cut them and harvest them as a chop and drop fertilizer for your food forest. So sorry for that long tangent, but I feel like every time I mention sea buckthorn, I have to go through that. But this whole entire area are runners that came out and popped up. And look at the size of some of these. I can dig these up and it's a brand new tree. This tree in a nursery is probably about a $50 to $60 tree. So I have maybe around $300 just sitting here in sea buckthorn. Now I'm actually going to let these grow and let these continue to fruit and put on such wonderful fruit, because as far as currants being a superfood, you know, currants are probably about 30 blueberries for each currant in terms of the nutrient content. These sea buckthorn berries are probably about 30 currants in terms of what their health benefit is. Plus, the leaves I can use as tea. So, multiple functional uses out of one plant. A chop and drop fertilizer, a food, delicious healthy berries that are very, very late season and allow me to extend the season of my food forest. They grow very well. It's ticking all the boxes. We're at the front of the house now, and this road, a lot of people come walking their dogs down here, so we wanted to do a bit of a exposure to different kind of landscaping here. This is Jerusalem artichokes with grapes growing up it, and we do have a gooseberry here, and gooseberry is one of the things that I actually wouldn't plant anymore in my food forest. A lot of people really love gooseberry, so don't get me wrong, it's a great plant. The berries themselves are fantastic. They're actually really tasty, they're large, the bush produces pretty well. Ow. So the fruit's pretty good, but the thorns are nasty. So there's these thorns on the plant, and they're really, really sharp. They'll like go in you really easily. They're super sharp. So a little annoying to harvest. So ease of harvest is pretty low on these, at least, you know, my variety. There's probably more thornless varieties, so maybe I shouldn't judge the whole plant off of this one specific plant. But even worse, they kind of struggle here in my soils. I'm not really sure why. I've tried them in a few spots and they always struggle. So sometimes, you know, when nature's telling you something, you should maybe, you know, maybe listen. But most importantly, there's always fruit flies in my gooseberries. I'm picking and eating them now because if I let them go any more ripe than this, these things will be covered on the inside with worms. Ask me how I know. Anything like that, you actually find out the hard way. So now I always check for little pinpricks in my gooseberries before I eat them. But this thing gets covered by not just worms, but many other pests. It does act like a magnet for them, so I'm going to leave it up. I'm not removing this because I actually want pests here, because I want the predators of those pests to naturalize on my land. I want them to say, hey, there's food here for me. I'm going to lay my eggs in this soil of this land so that next year when the pests emerge, the predators are emerging at the exact same time to eat them. So things I like, you might not like. Things that you like, I might not like. Things that grow well in your area, you know, might not grow well in mine. And things that aren't prone to pests in my area might be really bad. We have different insect loads and different climates and different rainwater fall patterns and different soil chemistry. So some of this stuff you just have to learn and try and see what works well for you. So get out there, try and plant lots of stuff. Go for diversity. Learn what works really well in your areas. Think about these categories that I listed here, and when in doubt, don't just grow something because it ticks all those categories, because the most important one is, do you actually enjoy eating it? Thanks for watching.